at my daughter's wedding, she wanted a classic car to take her away from the wedding. And I said, fine. So we had a Cadillac come. It was about a 38 Cadillac, I believe. And we took a little ride with the owner of the car in between the activities at the wedding. And I said, you know, I'd like to have a car like this. He said, no, you don't want a car like this, you want a Packard. And so I said, why? And he said, well, they are just the best classic car. He had some, and he said, they're just the best. So I immediately went out, I think the very next day, and got a Hemmings, which is the classic car collector magazine for listed. A lot of cars are listed in there for sale. Saw this 38 limousine down in Cincinnati, went down, talked to the owner, and a few days later I bought it. And I was very happy with it, but then I discovered that 37s were better. And so I sold the 38, now I just have 37s. Well, I suppose since I was a little boy, I've always liked cars. You know, little boys like everything with wheels on them. And old cars had wheels. And my first car was a Model A Ford, probably in about 1975, I suppose. And enjoyed that for a few years while our children were young, went on some trips and things. And then we took the family to a 4th of July parade over at Franklin, Indiana. And there were some big black cars there. I'd never seen anything like them. They were huge and black and long, and they were sedans, and I just fell in love with them. Well, they were Packards. And I said to myself, someday if I can ever have a car like that, that's my dream come true, is to have a big Packard. You know, that's what really hooked me, I think, more than anything, on Packards probably, is that when I got hooked on them, I started reading about the history of the company. And there is a lot of history about the Packard Car Company. And so I really delved into it and read everything I could get my hands on, and I was just intrigued by it. You know, the history of the car companies, you can learn a lot about the history of America by reading about the history of the car companies. One time, you know, Indiana made more cars than Michigan, but then that changed. But Indiana was second in automobile production. A lot of cars were made in Indianapolis. I have a list that hangs in my car barn of all the cars made in Indiana, and it just amazes you. There must be a couple hundred on there at least. They were made in almost every major town in Indiana, and some really small towns. Just in my little town of Greensburg of 11,000 people, there were 3 different brands of cars made. Not very many of each one, but there were 3 different cars made there. It's becoming very challenging to find people to work on these cars. I'm lucky that I have a good friend that's just a few miles away, and he's a very good mechanic, and he's very interested in these cars. So I'm very lucky, but it is getting harder to get body work done, everything. And you know, for the classic cars in particular, the owners are getting old and they're passing away, and a lot of this information and the parts and things are being lost. So it is a real challenge, but I have a lot of friends all over the country that if I'm missing a part and need something, I can call them. Just the other day, I had a starter that had a broken end on it, where the bearing holder and the brush holder was, and I needed that part, and so I put an ad in a couple of Packard and classic car magazines, and within about a month, I had 2 people call me and offer that part to me. And I bought it from one of them, got the starter fixed. And that was a rare part. It was only used mostly on Packard V12s, and so it was a hard part. You know, they only made, in the 8 years that Packard made V12s, they only made 5,466 of them. In 37, that was the year they made more than any, and they made 1,300 even this year. My wife and I go out a lot of evenings, and we'll drive 50, 60 miles and go to McDonald's and get a 99-cent ice cream cone. And we just love to drive, and I put a lot of miles on these cars. We drove one clear across country from New York to San Francisco a couple years ago, and without any trouble. And people think, well, you can't drive these old cars long distances without having trouble. That's not right. If you take care of them and maintain them properly, they're as good as a modern car. I'm not going to say you're not going to have any trouble, but usually the trouble is minor enough that you can fix it and go on. We have friends all over the country that we like to tour with. We're going in a week, actually. We're going on a caravan. Our car will be transported by carrier out to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and we'll meet up there with about 60 to 80 other cars, and we'll travel up into British Columbia to Lake Louise, and we'll come back down into Montana and do some touring. Lasts about 8 or 10 days, and really that to me is the really best feature of the club and of the hobby that I like is touring with other people. We have a lot of good friends we've made, and it'll be like a reunion next week when we get together. Yeah, you know, you don't have to have the most expensive car in the world. I started out with a Model A. They're very inexpensive, and they're wonderful cars, easy to work on. Model Ts are the same way. There's a lot of Fords and Chevys, and I'd advise anybody that's interested, just to get some books on a marque that they might be interested in and start reading about it, and you kind of get hooked from that. A lot of the cars today have high-speed rear ends put in them. I can pretty much keep up with any car at a stoplight unless it's a Corvette or something.